Now it's serious. All right, let's bring this Water Commission meeting of December 21st to order. Can we start with a roll call?
Chair Cooney,
Here.
Vice Chair Snyder,
Here.
Commissioner Keller,
Here.
Commissioner Davis,
Here.
Commissioner Young,
He's absent, but he will be here soon.
and Council Liaison Sneddon.
Okay, we have that. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
Chair Cooney, there are no changes to the agenda.
Fantastic. Do we have any public comment to get started?
Yes, we do.
Oh.
Oh, no. No, we don't. I'm sorry.
All right, you got me. All right, fantastic. So let's move on to the consent items, please.
Chair Cooney, as I push it to the commission, is there any questions related to anything on the consent agenda?
I move the consent calendar with a note that I will be abstaining on the minutes, item A.
Second.
Can we get a vote?
Commissioner Young, Commissioner Davis,
Yes, abstaining on item A.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Vice Chair Snyder,
Yes.
Chair Cooney.
Yes. Okay, great. So let's move on to the administrative items, starting with the water system annual report.
Chair Cooney, Water Commissioners, thanks for the opportunity to be here this morning. For those watching, I am Matt Ward, Water System Manager for the City of Santa Barbara. I'm here to present the Water System Annual Report. I welcome questions throughout the presentation. I also have with me Ms. Shu, Principal Engineer for Water Resources at the city. She'll be presenting also during this presentation. And so look forward to lots of questions and an engaging presentation. So a brief outline here is we're going to do a quick water system overview. We'll be going over our treatment, distribution, and Gibraltar operations update. And we're going to be touching a lot on capital because it's hitting us significantly and creating impacts to our workload. And we got a lot of great projects going forward. And then we'll be talking on a few challenges and improvements. So I am supported by Andrew Rhodes, Water Treatment Superintendent, and he's supported by Ben Spencer, our Water Treatment Supervisor. And I am also supported by Robbie Days, Water Distribution Superintendent, as well as Corey Olison, Roger Arroyo, and Maggie Heinrich, who are all Water Distribution Supervisors. So we got a strong team. And in total, we have 52 full-time employees and some hourly employees as well. So we're one of the largest sections in Public Works, and in fact, bigger than several city departments. So we're a large group, and we oversee over $65 million in annual funding. This is a snapshot, zoomed out, of our sources and our systems that provide water to our region and our community at the city. Tells a little bit of a story too. We have a very complex system. Our sources drive a lot of the complexity that we have. Our treatment system is a T5 system, as our distribution system is a D5, which is highest rated in terms of complexity. We also have a recycled water system, of course, our desalination facility, the El Estero water treatment facility, and also our groundwater production systems. And something that we'll be talking more about is just the current state of our assets. Our system is aged, especially our distribution system. It's complex, and it's under it's typically considered high pressure. So get more into that. Starting off with water treatment. They're responsible for treating our surface supplies for the entire South Coast region, more or less. And they support water supply management, so they're constantly working with COMB and the JPA members to support their capital improvement projects as well as supplies to their facilities. And it's an ongoing balance of trying to keep everything going for our region. And we are also supply, of course, water to Lacumba Mutual, and we work with Goleta Water District as needed to provide water to them during times when they're doing capital improvement projects. So our operations group, our city operations group, oversees the Cater Water Treatment Plant as well as Ortega Groundwater Treatment Plant and our hydroelectric plant. Some performance highlights we're going to talk about is just our surface water production, energy production, and groundwater production. So our surface water production for this year was below 15,000 acre feet. So you can see in this graph here on the right that the conservation continues to be a strong theme for our community. We have a pretty consistent supply trend for our JPA members as well as our consumption for our city residents. Energy production is a big part of offsetting Cater's energy demands. It's you can see on the lower left, that's the Pelton wheel that takes Gibraltar water, receives Gibraltar water, and turns it into power. And what you see in this graph is kind of a year that presented some usual trends, with the exception of the fact that we received water in Kachuma that we used going into February, March. We kind of changed up our usual strategy in order to maximize the benefit of that supply. As you can see in October, November, December, the water quality at Gibraltar did decline to the point where we were not using or not producing energy from this facility. I think a key point here that we want to bring up is that we are doing an energy master plan, and we're going to be looking at maximizing the benefit of the hydro facility at Cater. And I'll get into a special project that will present an opportunity for us to consider in the future. As you can see, in February, we shut down Ortega Groundwater Treatment Plant in order to rest the basin and take advantage of that opportunity to do some maintenance, which you see on the right there. We have one of our vertical turbine pumps that is being taken offline, so that way we could do some much needed maintenance. As I mentioned with our energy master plan, we're working on special projects so that we can maximize the benefit of Cater. And what you see on the right is the Tesla battery system that we installed this year, actually completed this year. It was a multi-year project, took a lot of hard work from our operations staff. We were able to take advantage of the fact that we were going to have to shut down power to the plant, so Edison went ahead and replaced the transformers that serve Cater. And this battery pack does allow us to offset peak demand, so between that 4 p.m., 9 p.m. window, we're able to transfer power to the grid, and it's going to lower our electric costs about $870,000 over the course of 10 years. It also provides an additional backup supply of energy to the plant. It can power the plant for about 4 hours. We do continue to have a diesel backup generator, which is really important for making sure this asset can always operate. That said, we are, and the project was funded through the PUC, the state PUC. We will be looking at opportunities to increase capacity at the plant, maximize the footprint we have there, and happy to have this project delivered. Moving on to water distribution. Water distribution is one of the largest groups in Public Works. They oversee a wide range of assets. We have over 300 miles of pipes, 27,000 service connections, 13 reservoirs, 14 pump stations, and 17 pressure zones. And the 17 pressure zones is a unique challenge because we have a lot of terrain, varied elevations, and it creates a lot of pressure management challenges. So they're responsible for operating and maintaining the system, obviously, and then they also oversee our recycle distribution system. They coordinate with a variety of utilities and other sections, divisions, departments within the city. And some of what we're going to go over is just their programs. We've broken up their programs into 3 general asset groups, or pipelines, pump stations, reservoirs, and then we have a group that oversees asset management, planning, coordination, and we're going to touch on some performance highlights. The pipeline program is one that is maintenance intense, capital intense. We'll be touching a lot more on that. Emergency main break response, supporting capital. Our flushing program, which is currently not in full deployment, we're having to scale that back a bit because of the staffing that we have available currently. Touching on some valve maintenance and showing you where we're at with that program and then we work on meters, of course, and fire hydrant maintenance and installing new service connections, which is something that we're seeing a record level of permits starting to come through the city as we're looking to add more density to our downtown region. What you see on the right is El Salito Reservoir. That's actually one of the photos from when it was originally constructed over 100 years ago. That reservoir is actually in decent shape. We'll be touching on some of the reservoirs that actually need capital improvement, but you can tell by the vintage of the picture that it's served us well over a long period of time. And a big component of managing our reservoirs includes maintaining water quality. A lot of the system was designed to maximize storage, and over time we've learned that water quality degrades, and so we've done a thorough study of our reservoirs and how we need to go about replacing them, and we're going to get more into that. And then, like I mentioned, pressure reducing stations, that's a part of our pressure management program. And then, of course, SCADA to keep eyes on how our system's performing all the times. And this particular section also assists with special projects up at Gibraltar Dam. And they oversee 4 production wells. Asset management program, you've heard a lot about asset management within Water Resources. It's been a big goal. It really started with El Estero and some initiatives there, and has since moved to distribution and treatment as well. What we have on the right here is an example of some of the asset management work that we're doing. You can see the instrument in the gentleman's hand that's used to collect high precision GPS, which is a program that we piloted. And in fact, others have come to us to study how we've used it. East Bay Mud came and visited us, which was an agency of that size and scope. I was a little shocked, but they were really impressed with what we put together, and we're looking at how we can maximize the benefit of this data throughout our capital improvement process. As you can imagine, having that precise location information in your GIS gives you a lot of power, so that way people are not having to search plus or minus 3 feet in order to locate the assets. So it's something we've been working on for a few years and is really starting to come to fruition. A few other things here to mention is just the utility coordination aspect. There's just so much capital going on in the city, as I'm sure you've noticed driving through the city streets. We're seeing a record number of utility permits, so that's the other utility, SoCalGas, Edison. They're all needing to kind of go through the same process as us of replacing their assets. And then we manage a cross-connection program, because after we deliver water, we don't want it back. We want to make sure that we preserve our system. And then again, providing recycled water to our parks, golf station, or golf courses, and many other city facilities, as well as public facilities. Some performance highlights, emergency repairs, emergency response in general is something that water distribution is a big part of for the city. We not only respond to our emergencies, but we respond to the calls from PD and fire, as well as parks. Really anything that comes in after hours that's not public safety comes to us, and we provide a staff member after hours to support the needs of our community. You can see on the right here, we've got a crew working on a water main break. That's something we'll talk more about. Again, valve maintenance, hydrant inspections. This is something we're proud of. It's really a significant challenge to be able to restore water within 12 hours. That might seem a little shocking because, yeah, we are staffed and we are really good at our job. But there are a lot of other utilities out there, and we rely on them to mark their utilities after we do have a break. And so that can sometimes, those lead times can make this a bit of a challenge. But as you can see, almost 95% of the time, we're meeting this goal, and it's a important goal for the community. Doug, you start?
Yeah, it was interesting, Matt and I took some time to meet actually one-on-one with all the staff and just to talk about how work was going, what were there's frustrations, and one of the things that did come up was just this needing, and I'm using this opportunity just to inform is, when we do have to dig in the road, you have to call USA, and this is Underground Service Alert. All utilities are notified, and they have a certain time to respond and come out and mark their utilities. And in those times, we can't do anything. And that can be very frustrating for our customers. They're sitting there watching city staff sitting there. And I just tell you, from the city staff perspective, we hate sitting there and not being able to do anything. But for the safety of our people and our community, we just can't. Can't go into the ground until all the utilities have been marked. And so it is a frustration, and we're, I think in this, as we are starting now to get more high precision data, potentially sharing, but there are obviously security reasons for not sharing some of this information. But it is one of the challenges we have, because our folks will mobilize, we'll get there, we'll get prepped, we get our parts, and then we just sit and we wait for the gas company to show up, electric company. And so anyway, I just want to put that out there because it is a frustration of our staff as well. Just having to explain to the public why they can't do anything. Yeah.
With that, I will add that we stay very busy. I do have a clip here of a water main break that was significant. It's really what we're trying to avoid with our asset management work, and I don't have the audio on it, so I'm just going to kind of share with you a little bit of information about the incident. This incident occurred just at McKinley School, over near the community college, the elementary school there, and as you can see by the amount of debris, it was a significant water main break. It required a robust response from the entire Public Works Department, but especially with water distribution taking lead. In this case, it was unfortunate. We were really not aware of the risk that we had with that particular pipe. It was a 12-inch diameter cast iron pipe in the mid-50s, and it destroyed a significant section of the playground. We did work swiftly, and we had the full playground restored within a week. And so that was huge, and we had to coordinate, obviously, a lot with the school on that. But then, as you could see by the amount of mud that was down below, that there was a lot of cleanup. We had to work with Woodside HOA, and then I want to give credit to Marissa Kahn and our risk management group. She does an exceptional job of managing claims for the city. And the unfortunate total on the cost was about $1 million worth of cleanup and repair. So significant costs. It's what we're really trying to avoid with our asset management program. I'll talk a little bit more about that. What you see here is our costs that we've gathered from our CMMS, our computerized maintenance management system. These costs are really a reflection of how well we manage our emergency response, but also they don't include a lot of other things. Like, on average, we experience about $100,000 in claims annually. There's also the cost that's not captured is the reactive response, the pulling people off of one thing to do another thing. And then there's the cost of the community, which can be substantial, probably equal, as some studies have indicated, of having to reroute traffic, close businesses, close schools, things like that. So it's a substantial cost, and it really is one of those things that it's just lost time and resources and money. So moving on to our water main replacement goal, this is the why. Why are we replacing water mains at the rate we are? It's a significant investment that we're pouring into our capital program. It's the biggest asset group that we have, and it's this work in main replacement is really critical. And I think the next slide shows this quite a bit. And again, we're trying to replace 2% of our water mains annually. In fact, we're not trying, we're doing it. It's a huge goal. If we're talking to many other utilities out there, they are in the 1%, 1.2% range, which is where we used to be. But you'll see in this next slide the why, again, why we're doing this. And we do use a risk, not the next slide, the slide after. We do use a risk-based approach to replacement planning, and that's likelihood of failure and consequence of failure is what we're trying to gauge. And we are working with Colorado State University. We've been partnered with them for some time, and we've developed a replacement model that takes into account all the characteristics of our pipelines, so that way we can, at a desktop level, start to analyze where's our challenges and how can we put together different pipes into a single project, because a lot goes into optimizing our replacement planning. So this is the results of using that model that we have with Colorado State, and we partner with them on. What you see on the right is the pipes that are timing out in our system. And as you can see, we have a wave of pipes that are coming. And again, appreciate all the support that Council and the Water Commission has given to our replacement efforts, because as you can see on the left, we have yet to see a lot of our pipes time out. We have recognized that our post-war cast iron does present a significant problem. So time-based isn't the one thing we take into consideration as we're evaluating where our replacement needs. And as you can see, the difference between 1% and 2% in the risk that's presented in red there, that we are attempting to head off a lot of risk. This graph here shows our main break since 1980, a graph of this. And so we have yet to see the big wave of pipes timing out, and it's likely that we could see more breaks. As you can see, in 2020, we began replacing at the 2% rate, and we've seen kind of a little dip, but we know that another increase is likely to come based on the information we have. And we'll get more into the main replacement as we touch on capital. I want to touch on valve maintenance. It's really important that we exercise our valves annually. What this graph shows me is that, in 2018, we were in a period where staffing levels was a real challenge for the water distribution operators in particular. I'm going to get more into that at the very end of the presentation, but as you can see, as we ramped up our capital, we were doing more valve maintenance in order to make sure that we could achieve those shutdowns and make sure that we minimize the impacts to the community when we do have outages. The AWWA goal for American Water Works Association goal for valve exercising is exercising every valve annually. And as you can see in the green, we're getting to less than half of our valves on an annual basis and able to exercise them. I will say that a lot of agencies struggle in this area. It's a lofty goal, but really if you're trying to maximize the life of your pipes and your ability to control shutdowns, you do want to perform this maintenance. And as you can see, we're kind of tapering down the last couple of years in our ability to address that. And again, that goes back to two things really, our current staffing levels, but also the amount of capital that we're having to contribute to on an operations basis. I'll touch real briefly on this one. Commissioner Snyder?
Thank you. I had a quick question about this, just generally thinking about as you're doing the water main replacement and the valve exercising, are there opportunities around new technologies that would help automate some of this stuff or help advance the system, or is it pretty standard, it just needs to be replaced, but the technology is not advancing that much?
So, yeah, great question, and thanks for bringing that up, because the person on the right is kind of showing you how it's done. We also, though, have a valve hydraulic piece of equipment that kind of takes the labor out of it. This is the fastest way to do it, but we almost, I would say probably 80% of the time are using that valve actuator in order to do it. It does gather information, but there's nothing you can really, that's feasible that you could automate the process, unfortunately. We're always looking at innovation. We're a member of an innovation working group, ISLE, and so we're always scanning for what opportunity can we find to use technology to reduce the labor that we put into the work. But unfortunately, it's just not feasible.
Thank you.
So maintaining our fire hydrants is obviously a significant, important goal, and we do maintain our fire hydrants. We inspect them on a 3-year basis. We exercise the valves that are associated with them. ensure that the control valve to them is working. And this does feed into the International Standards Organization rating that we receive, so it does impact rates for insurance. So we work closely with the fire department to make sure that we're achieving strong ISO scores, keeping our cost for insurance low for our community. And we tend to score very well. Moving on to Gibraltar Dam. You can see a picture of our operations and maintenance crew, or at least one of them. We only have 2 FTEs assigned to Gibraltar Dam, and that is Mr. Frank Deely, our dam caretaker. And he's up top on Coomba Peak for one of the snow event that I'm sure you all recall. Frank lives in the backcountry and at the dam, and it's a unique challenge to live that remote. He does the job excellent. He exceeds monitoring requirements. He takes a lot of pride in it. And his assistant, Mr. Castillo, also gives him a lot of help. The asset management that we've been doing in distribution and treatment, we're also going to be doing for Gibraltar. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Some performance highlights that we have is the storm response. The January 9th storm was significant, and we'll touch more on that. And then we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into the asset inventory later in the capital part of our presentation. And then you can see above, that's a Bluebird Day at Gibraltar. It's just beautiful. Asset that we've had for over 100 years, and we're fortunate to have it. And this is a snapshot of actually January 10th. So January 9th, as we've reported through other, our wastewater group and others, presented a lot of challenges. And I recall on that specific, as the storm was coming in and the latest flood models were hitting, and they were predicting about 9 inches, and we saw nearly double that in the backcountry. And being minimally staffed and just the way that the storm hit just made for just full all hands on deck, like figure out where our damage is and what it looks like. And as you can see, this is the lower road to Gibraltar. So this is U.S. National Forest. It maintains the road. As you can see on the left there, all those landslides, that's a lot of what we're having to deal with. On the upper road as well, we've got several miles of backcountry road that we have to maintain, and there was slides everywhere. And from the January 10th on, we were doing damage assessment and just trying to access the dam. We had mobilized dozers and as well as loaders and other equipment just to be able to access the dam, which took a few days. So we actually had to helicopter some of our staff in, our engineering team, as well as some contractors to do some damage so that you have log booms stuck in your floodgates. And it was actually something that we didn't immediately pick up on that night, but then the next morning we found out that in fact that the log booms had been compromised and pulled through the floodgates. And what you can see on the left is kind of like normal flow. And then you might, in the little box on the right, the yellow box, you'll notice that there's like just the tiniest indicator of some cables being pulled through there. And so that, of course, was quite alarming. And that next day on January 11th, we mobilized our staff out there to come up with a method. And we were fortunate. We have a great engineering team, and they were able to free the cables. It was something that, in a nightmare scenario, we're going to drain the lake to that low level and lose our supply there. But they were quickly able to mobilize and come up with a method to actually cut the cable on both sides and then pull it from both downstream and upstream of the spill gates and made quick work of it. So we were never in a situation where we actually had a significant threat. And then I'm going to let Ms. Shu, Principal Engineer, go ahead and take over and give us an update on some of the capital improvement that's driving our work.
Good morning. I'm Ashley Shu, Principal Engineer, and I oversee our Water Resources Engineering team, and we're responsible for supporting the entire Water Resources Division in delivering design and construction of capital projects. as well as supporting operations when needed, of course, mobilizing during emergency situations. So I'm going to provide an overview, look a little bit more at some of the storm damage we experienced from January 9th. It's timely since we're right in the middle of our first major storm event for this rain year. And did want to mention and reiterate what Mr. Ward has mentioned, that we're in a period of our strongest capital program for the water program. We currently have about 24 active capital projects totaling a value of over $200 million. Oh. All right. And I'm done.
There is a backup generator,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Do we need to wait for Zoom to get back up?
yeah.
Okay.
So let's take a break.
Take a break.
Oh, it came back up. Oh.
Yeah.
Let's just check first.
Item I was on, I was just gonna give you a small. Supportive, bigger position. Morning, they split the whole morning just because they were changing chairs. How wonderful it is.
I do not have a backup generator.
We had a brief discussion, like,
Morning, I thought it was gonna be 4 o'clock finally.
I'm not doing it.
They start with the issue, and then because they had so many people wanting to make comments, I was only given a minute. So by 2 minutes.
You're like, so that's right away. Yeah, you're like, so the funny story about how that works is. Yeah, nobody wants to talk to me. My clients are completely like, please don't call us. We want to do
So they're just putting.
which is the opposite. Like there's like 2 kinds of consultants in my company, and the opposite of me is like everyone needs to stop calling. I'm not gonna help you.
Right.
just go down to Clark Street.
I really like this. Okay.
Okay, so the power is back and we're live, so we're gonna continue.
All right. I will pick up where I left off. That was very exciting. All right, so then it's very timely to jump into talking about some of our emergency response due to January's storm events. Mr. Ward has already touched on some of the damages associated with the Gibraltar Reservoir and Dam facility. This is not even an inclusive list of the damages that were incurred, but I'll go briefly through the next few slides, just walking you through some of the challenges that we had to overcome. And most of these repairs are already complete. Most of them were completed within the first month or so. We do have a few that are ongoing, but the other item that continues to be ongoing is our coordination with FEMA, and that is a significant effort to coordinate with FEMA, providing all of the required backup documentation in an effort to get reimbursement. So that is continuing. It will continue for quite some time, even as we enter the next winter and potentially additional damages. Devil's Canyon Creek is located up adjacent to the Gibraltar Reservoir and provides an important diversion of great high-quality water, especially when the Gibraltar Reservoir water quality starts to degrade. And due to the storm on January 9th, it was completely silted in, as you can see in the photo on the left. So mobilized a contractor to immediately start clearing that debris, reestablish the channel flow, and get those diversions started back up. So that was a big success story, and that work was done by the end of January. We've talked already about the Gibraltar log boom damage that occurred during the January 9th storm with that large amount of debris pulling the log boom system through the spillway gates. So we did mobilize another contractor to perform an emergency repair immediately, and they replaced about 200 feet of the log boom that had been carried through the spillway gates. And they did a great job of kind of cobbling it together with parts from our city yard, from their own yard. They really did a great job in getting the system at least functioning enough for the next series of storms that we're going to be coming through to help protect the dam. We are, meanwhile, doing a replacement of the entire log boom system that's currently in construction. Not today due to the rain, but that should be in place here shortly. We had hoped to have it in place before the first rains, but as we started doing further investigation, realized that the anchor points actually needed to be physically repaired and replaced. So when it's done, it's going to be a nice, robust system to protect the dam for years to come. We talked about damage to the lower access road, but there was also significant damage to the upper road. And this is off of the paved Gibraltar Road, about 6.6 miles of unpaved road. And we estimated that about 30% of the road was damaged from debris, vegetation, rock slides. And again, it was critical to reestablish access for the caretaker who was stuck out at Gibraltar and to get staff in to bring resources and perform inspections and get repair work completed. So we did emergency work to clear the road, reestablish access, and then we followed that up with a more comprehensive repair in March and replaced some of the storm drain facilities that had been damaged. And then concurrently, we now have a multi-year contract in place with a contractor to perform preventative maintenance before the rainy season and then respond to emergencies as needed. So we're in a good place there. We also had a landslide, hillside failure at the tunnel reservoir. You can see the access road around the tank was completely inundated with debris, and did emergency debris removal and then some slope stabilization followed up later in the spring. We also had a road slip out or failure at the access road to Schofield Reservoir. And we've done an emergency repair to stabilize this enough, but the long-term repair is actually being combined with a streets project where they're doing a very similar repair to other locations on the paved Gibraltar Road. So we're looking for some economies of scale there and performing the work efficiently. And finally, related to storm damage, the recycled water pump station located out at the golf course experienced some heavy erosion, which undermined the concrete foundation. And you can see the photo with the ladder in that void space, and it actually caused the pad to sink and damage some of the piping. So staff, as soon as they found that, immediately filled the void, and we have a design complete. It's out to bid right now to do a comprehensive repair and actually inject polyurethane material in there to expand and help lift the concrete pad and piping back to their design elevation. So we've talked a lot about Gibraltar so far, but it is a very important asset to the city. And as Mr. Ward mentioned, we are currently working on an asset inventory of all of the assets located out there. That's something that has long been needed, and going through the storm response and spending a lot of time out at Gibraltar brought this to the forefront. So we're in the process of completing that inventory, determining the value of the assets, and then developing a proactive maintenance and repair program. We're also looking at upgrading the caretaker facility house. There's building repairs that are needed. We're looking at a long-term potable water supply. It's kind of ironic that it's located at the lake, but the lake isn't a reliable potable water source for the caretaker. So we're looking at potentially drilling a well to supply the caretaker. And then also looking at some power options, looking at solar and solar options to provide more reliable power there. And then we are also in the process of a design study to address the Division of Dam Safety concerns about the vintage concrete on the spillway that was original to the construction of the dam that was built in 1922. So that study is underway, and we do plan to do some field investigations in the spring when the flow has slowed down enough to be able to do that. Switching gears a little bit now, and hitting on one of the largest capital programs within the water capital program, and talking about water main replacement. Mr. Ward mentioned we have a really lofty goal of replacing 2% of our system each year. That equates to about 6 miles of water main replacement. And we've had a lot of challenges over the last few years in meeting that. Of course, starting with the pandemic, work had to be put on hold, and then that led into supply chain issues and delays getting materials, really significant delays in getting materials. And then, of course, inflation, high construction costs, and contractors having labor shortages. So all of that has contributed to being challenging, but we continue to push really hard and be diligent in meeting that goal for all the reasons that Mr. Ward described, and trying to slow the curve of breaks. We currently have a project out to bid. It's called our FY23 Water Main Replacement Project, and it is about 7 miles of replacement. So that's a bit over our goal, trying to make up for some lost time during the COVID years. We also have been working really hard to adjust our strategy to the current challenges. So we've done a couple of things with the project that's currently out to bid. Historically, we've split our annual water main into 2 separate contracts and put out 2 bids. And this year we decided to try packaging it into one large project with the goal of getting more interest from contractors, even contractors outside of the area, because it's a larger dollar value. And with the intent of increasing competition, which tends to bring down prices. So that's one thing that we're piloting this year. Another thing to help combat the supply chain material delays is we put out a separate purchase order for the city to procure the long lead time materials. And that way we have those materials in hand when the contractor is ready to start. So they're not then having to wait 3-6 months for those materials to come in once we give them notice to proceed. So we're hopeful. We did already receive bids for the materials, and the construction contract is out to bid now. It opens in mid-January. With the increased investment in water main replacement, there's also been a corresponding increase in investment on the streets maintenance side, with the passage of Measure C a few years ago, which has made it even more important for all of the assets within Public Works to be really closely coordinated, and making sure that there aren't overlapping projects. The worst case for all of us is that a street is paved and a few months later we're coming in with a water main replacement. So we've been putting a lot of effort, and we're making great strides in utilizing GIS and mapping tools to help identify those conflicts, and then working together to sequence work appropriately. And we're also trying out, piloting a couple of ideas here. You can see both De La Vina and Cliff Drive highlighted. De La Vina, Upper De La Vina, the streets group received a grant to do a large corridor improvement project there. And it was also slated for water main replacement. So we are actually combining the two into one bid. And so we are including the water main replacement work in the streets contract. And that will be going out in the spring with the goal of, it'll look like one seamless project to the public. And not having two separate contractors trying to coordinate timing. And we're hoping to see some economies of scale there with cost. And then for Cliff Drive, we're kind of doing the opposite, where it was slated for slurry seal pavement maintenance and also slated for water main replacement. So we're including the slurry seal in the water main replacement contract. And we're doing a cost share between streets and water for both of those projects. Before oh, sure.
Sorry to interrupt, thank you. Back to the slide before, and just first, it's fantastic coordinating the efforts, but so for the streets, and I'll just say I'm one of these streets, but this would be the answer for anybody, the streets that have both streets and water, but not coordinated, what does that look like? Like what is will it be, if you could just describe for people to know.
Sure. The way it's shown on the map, the two shown in yellow, Cliff Drive and De La Vina, coordination meaning they're being combined into a single contract. But the locations you can see where they have overlapping for both streets and water means that they're still being coordinated, but they're being accomplished through two separate contracts, through a street maintenance contract or in-house paving, and then a water contract. But the timing is still being coordinated. They're just not combined into a single contract.
Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out. Before I describe the transmission main renewal Phase 1 project, I do want to talk about another related project, which is the Desal Link pipeline project, and that is shown in the blue line on the map on the screen. That project was completed this year, installed a new 24-inch transmission pipeline from the Desal plant up to the intersection of Mission and Garden Street. And that is the first piece of a series of projects to connect the Desal plant with the Cater water treatment plant. And the transmission main renewal, Phase 1 project, is shown in the yellow line, and that will rehabilitate the existing transmission main system rather than doing a full replacement. We did find it was in good condition, but needed some maintenance and repair. And so that will be the second piece of the route to push water from the Desal plant up to Cater. It is about to start construction in the new year, and then it really is the second in a series of projects, which I'll get into in a bit. Mr. Ward.
Just a quick question on the desal pipeline. How do we do with toxics in the ground?
That's a great question. We did have a significant amount of contaminated soil removal and the costs associated with disposing of that properly.
Yeah, I assume that was going to be the case, knowing the history of that area and the problems individual properties have had.
Yes, we did anticipate that, but it was even more than.
And how do we do
we had
budget-wise?
originally.
If
I
could
don't know
ask.
the number off the top of my head.
I just mean, were we within budget, or did we have to do supplementals in order to get it done?
For the project overall, we did need additional
All right.
funding.
Thank you.
And I just want to take the opportunity to make a couple comments. So with the main replacement projects, that takes significant effort from the operations group. With the shutdowns, it's something that each contracted out, we have used, we've maximized the use of our contractors. With 6 miles of main, we're averaging about 80 shutdowns per year. So that's just, that means you have to go out there and test the shutdown, then execute it, and then turn the water back on and do it really well, because the sequencing of the work, the bacteriological testing requirements, things like that, all have to go very smooth in order to deliver things on time. So it is a significant workload to the operations group. Typically, those shutdowns require 2 to 3 people to actually plan and then execute. So a lot of staff time going into that, something we're looking at. But then also with the transmission main renewal, we've identified 5 shutdowns at a minimum that'll be required for that, and that does require staff, in both cases, coming in oftentimes early in the morning, but specifically with the transmission main, that means that they're in at 2 a.m. and that they're there throughout the duration of the work until usually late at night, because of the sheer volume of water you have to discharge, which is small in terms of our total supply, but it's just required in order to do the work. And with the renewal work, we were very strategic in what we decided to replace. We did look at lining the pipe. We looked at replacing all the appurtenances, but we actually scaled it back, recognizing that we should sequence the work over a longer period of time, because at some point we're optimistic that we are going to have a lining solution that we can use to ultimately address the necessary upgrades to the pipe to make it totally competent. And obviously it's a transmission main, so it's going to be really important that it functions well. But we just decided to not replace everything. We're really trying to smooth these costs over a period of time, and we're trying to be surgical about how we're applying our resources, and it takes a lot of work.
And one additional project that doesn't have its own slide, but is important to mention because it's another piece of moving water from the desal plant up to Cater, is the replacement of the pumps at the desal plant with pumps that are robust enough to push the water all the way up to Cater. That project is in construction, should be wrapped up in spring or summer of next year. The Cater Reservoir Resiliency Project is going to install approximately 2.5 million gallon second finished water reservoir at the location shown on the red box on the screen. And this project is going to address a few operational concerns and improve resiliency for the Cater treatment plant. It's going to improve the chlorine contact time as part of the disinfection process. It's also going to allow the ability to bypass the existing finished water reservoir, which is located under the green grassy area you can see in this aerial photo. Currently, there's no way to bypass that reservoir without shutting down the treatment process. So this new reservoir will allow us to bypass and perform maintenance on the existing reservoir, as well as some seismic upgrades to the existing reservoir. And the overall goal of improving the resiliency of the treatment plant and the facility, we're also looking at and planning to install ground-mounted solar panels and additional battery systems to provide additional offset to Cater's power needs. And another piece that's included in this project is the final part of the connection between desal and Cater, which is some additional piping to connect the finished water reservoir to the transmission system. And that will be the final project in connecting. And then the other importance of this project is that it needs to be complete before we move on to the Victrace Reservoir Replacement Project. And you've started hearing about this project recently. It is underway and in the planning process. It's a critical storage facility for the entire system with a current storage capacity of 10 million gallons. And the project will replace this reservoir in its entirety, looking at going from a partially buried reservoir to two buried reservoirs on the site. And we have the design RFP posted. I believe proposals are actually due today. And we've already selected a public outreach firm to assist us with developing a strategy for delivering this, what's going to be a very challenging project in the middle of a neighborhood over a long duration. And then we also have an environmental firm already under contract doing preliminary environmental investigation work And that was used to help inform the scope of the RFP for design. And we are expecting to have a design firm selected in early 2024. Planning to, you'll see that contract recommendation coming to Water Commission in the spring and then going on to council.
We will be reaching out to try and offer opportunities for those who would like a tour before we bring this item back, so that you have a sense of kind of the space we'll be talking about.
And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Mr. Ward. Unless there's any other questions related to capital. Thank you.
All right, yeah, so we're going to touch just briefly on the upcoming rate increases, not really get into it, but just touch on the subject and staffing and capital improvement. One thing I feel like I failed to talk to you enough is the pictures. So in the upper right, that's one of our operators at Big Trace, cleaning the walls of the reservoir. We were performing an inspection. That project's been in the queue for 20 years. It's definitely one that's necessary. And I'll talk just a touch more on that. And then you can see some operators below working on the valving at that location. As you can tell, there's some big pipes. It's a really critical facility for the city. It's a big consolidation effort to create a hub for our storage at Big Trace. Rates, so preliminary estimates, they're coming in double digits, and we're still refining that and still working on that. And the drivers are the aged infrastructure and the fact that we're facing non-deferrable capital. We've really pushed out the useful life of mainly the distribution facilities at this point, and it's just we're doing everything we can to smooth the curves, but the fact is we need to replace these key assets.
So this is very timely, both the wastewater and the water capital. We will be planning on a robust conversation in January on rates, and we're going to try and get as much information out to you ahead of time, not only on the affordability studies, so we hope to get that to you early, and so you'll be able to look at that. But we really want to have a good conversation. This kind of sets the base. I hope when we use this presentation today, you didn't see any fluff in there. We do not have any fluff. But really trying to think through what options we have, because the rate revenue increases we're looking at are pretty significant. So I am at this point we're proposing to do a 3-hour meeting, so we have some really time to get into and throw up some spreadsheets, talk about what some of those implications are. So much more to come on this, but hopefully this is kind of gets you started on where we need to go.
Yeah, and I think you've probably heard in other presentations just some of the drivers that are well known at this point. High inflation, energy costs that we've experienced from the fires and strategic initiatives to really go green. And so anyway, we'll talk more about a lot of that in January. Staffing. So recruitment and retention has been a significant challenge for both water and wastewater, specifically in our distribution operations as well as our collections. It's something we've put a lot of work into, is developing our staff and then retaining them. But we are struggling. And currently, like in our distribution group, we have 18 operators, we have 6 vacancies. And we're working constantly to try and retain operators. This is a problem that's been happening over a long period of time. And it's going to continue for another long period of time because there's just a deficit in the industry. And the labor constraints aren't just to water operators, it's also our construction workers. And I think it's been discussed a lot lately, but really in the operators, it's a niche market. They perform essential services. We have tried contracting out operations type of work in the past a few times, and there's just really no one there and no one competent. So everyone that's willing and able is in the industry, and they're actively getting recruited at a lot of larger agencies that are experiencing the same strains that we are. And specific to us, we developed an experience gap. It's been identified, it's a 15-year gap between your 3-year employees and then your 15, 17, 18, and on employees. And we are expecting more retirements soon. So one of the things as we're experiencing another wave of retention issues, we did Water Resources did a survey of all of its employees. And then we use that information to then figure out how we can have small group discussions. And that's the way we found is best to reach our staff. You talk to them in a large group and it tends to be kind of quiet. You talk to them one-on-one and it tends to be quiet. But when you get them in small groups of their peers, then they tend to open up a lot. And so we talked at length, multiple times to kind of understand what the challenges are for them. And then how can we, attract more people like them, especially, the ones that have interested and the ones who have stuck around. Learned a lot of good things that we're familiar with, but also it's just been a good touch point. But the challenge is there, and it's going to continue. So some improvements that we're looking at is citywide comp and class study. We've been very engaged with that. In fact, our bargaining unit, the TAP unit, recently went through some negotiations. I was fortunate to be able to take part in some of that and actually work on identifying comparable agencies that are truly like T5, D5 agencies that have the same similar challenges as us. The second part of that's a classification component, looking at how we're structured. We're fortunate that in 2020 we did a significant lift in distribution to classify our positions in a way so that we could probably do a minor tweak, and it'll really get us to a sound structure that'll support our function going into the future. But the pressure is on, and the experienced staff that we have, they've expressed their concerns about making sure we have adequate staffing, but also to retain people and be able to train people and keep them. And then for our junior staff, they're interested in promoting quick, and we're currently kind of set up for that. And so we've created task books and training programs, and we're aggressively trying to get them trained up. But with this industry, it takes about 5 years to really start to become fully aware of what you're doing, and you're operating a complex, high pressure system. And so errors do not go unnoticed, in hydraulics. You're going to know real quick if something's not right. And obviously, we take very seriously our responsible charge of making sure the city has potable water. So looking closely at it, very engaged. Another improvement is our standby. In 2020, we really doubled down on our standby scheduling so that we do have 3 operators available 24/7 to respond to a water main break emergency. Like I said, we have 60 to 80 main breaks a year on average. That's kind of predictable. They do happen at any hour. There's not a real strong trend there. But making sure that staff know when they're going to be called on was definitely a big improvement. And then also we did get, most recently, we've acquired a hotel lease for the one operator who's required to be here locally, able to respond at any moment and then address a water main emergency. We're also working on coordinating with some of our other departments that we work with and serve as we try to figure out what's the best combination to not have those $1 million main breaks. And that's something else that I'll get into in my next slide, but it looked like a good question.
Question. Does Goleta experience the same staffing challenges as we do?
Commissioner Young, staffing-wise, is that what I heard? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, we've identified that they're paying more, but they do have the same challenges the whole industry does, but they're about 15% ahead of us in salary, so. Okay. We're looking at the benefits component of it, of course, and looking at total comp with that study. But yeah, they're being very competitive. The big drain, to just go a little deeper on that, is Los Angeles Department of Water Power, Las Virgenes. We just lost another employee to them. So it's those big agencies that are in areas that are more affordable, that are able to really take away our staff. And we're reading the exit interviews and we're talking to the staff, and they like what we have going here. It's just, for them, it's kind of they need to be able to get the common things that people want as they move through their career. last but certainly not least here is the outreach campaign. We've been active in reaching out to automotive programs, community colleges, but we need to really, triple down on that and making ourselves more visible in the community. A lot of our staff, they work super hard. They work extremely long hours. We run really lean crews. Like you can see, there's 2 people here on this break on the right here. There's actually 3 people that we send to a main break response. They all stay very busy. They're all very efficient in how they do the work. They take a ton of pride in the work too. In exploring like outreach videos and things like that. What are our competitors doing? What are other agencies doing? We've put together our own outreach video on the content. But I'm recognizing now that there's some content that's emerging that's specific to what we need. And so we're looking for that market segment, that labor market segment that has the people that are really going to make sure that our system's handled and that we can stay fully staffed in the future. And we're looking at up staffing and other things like that as well. I'll get into that a little bit more. But poster boards at our capital improvement projects when we're out there performing the work, getting a QR code on that poster board that takes them to the jobs and the opportunities we have available. These are great jobs, and we plan to be very active in the community, in our schools, and producing the right kind of media and content to make sure that it's a known role. Like firefighting is a known role. Like we have, dozens of operators at the city, so being more visible.
I just had a question on like the distinction between the recruitment and retention challenges. When you do have open positions, are you getting a robust pool of applicants, or is it really on both sides that you're having challenges?
Both sides. 10 years ago, we had, we could get 100 applicants for a very general recruitment, and operator and training is written pretty open. And, now it's dozens and some don't show up. But I think that, again, we can do a better job in our outreach and being more visible, certainly can. And I think it's going to garnish some results. And with the comp and class study, I think that will be more competitive.
Madam Chair, just a quick question. I kind of got lost on the compensation classification study, timing-wise, and usually that wouldn't be something that would come to the Water Commission, I don't think. But I sure would like to, if we could just be briefed on what those findings are, just to kind of know what the issues are that we're dealing with, because the recruitment as well as the experience gap again, these are, how do I say it, critically essential services workers to this community, and people don't totally understand the problem that we're facing in that regard.
Yes, I mean, we've been eager to. Oh, no, I was just going to add, it's been a while since we've heard the consultant is Siegel. They're working on the class and comp study, and we did a big survey this summer, provided them with a lot of information, and haven't seen much from them yet, but I do hope there's more of an interactive process, because I know we're eagerly looking to sit down with them and talk about our challenges and how, what are other agencies doing? What can we do? How do we become the employer of choice? We need, that's where we need to be. And I think we offer a very exciting place to work. We've got a lot of good challenges to work on. And yeah, I think we need some help in making sure people know that. Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair, is this the right time to discuss the staffing fully, or do you want to wait till one more slide and open, or should I make my comments now, or questions on staffing?
Up to you. The main point on the next slide is just like we're making some improvements, but please, council members.
I don't want to miss my chance.
No, yeah, right.
That's where the conversation's going. So I had some questions, in relation, first of all, thank you to staff who are still here and staying, and we value you. And I worry every single day when I know that nearby you can get 15% more. I cannot tell you how much we appreciate you, and that's not sustainable to stay that way and to expect that you would stay even with all the value added reasons for working for the city, which, I mean, they're dwindling. I'm just going to say that. And I would like to say on the class and comp study, it's only going to be really useful if you don't hold back on what it is that's really needed, what it is that would have you stay. I mean, I think I'm recognizing and have for a couple years that this is dire, and we're really down to the bone here on what we can cut or adjust. And just please don't hold back on sharing what it is that needs to happen and change so that you'll stay and that we can recruit people. And my son said to me the other day, he's like, why do people keep calling it a labor shortage? It's a pay shortage. And I want to call that for what it is. It's not a shortage of people who are qualified, ready, able. It's a shortage of our ability to be able to compensate. And with that, I have a real question. I know we're going to talk about it in depth with rate studies, but you know, part of what you said is the rates being used to account for the aged infrastructure. What about Measure C? Why is Measure C not utilized more to compensate for, I mean, all these pipes that are aging out at the same time, the concrete that's, you know, vintage concrete and needs to be looked at? That's infrastructure. So I'm not sure, and maybe that could be part of the further discussion on rates, but I'm not sure that this department is leaning on Measure C enough to compensate for that infrastructure. And maybe not prepared to talk about it now, but I'll make that as a comment that I'm not understanding why these huge infrastructure things are not being funded by Measure C so that there's more to pay for salaries. I'll just say that just outright. And then a question about the 2%. I'm just wondering if that's still the sweet spot. I mean, we sort of made that recommendation to ramp that up to offset catastrophic breaks, but when you're talking about staff being stretched so thin, is this still the right balance between that? And then we also talk about things like inflation and supply chain, and are those going to lessen, and maybe we pace that out better. But just a genuine question about, we were very aggressive with that 2% goal, and a lot has changed in the meantime. So just wondering about that.
Councilmember Snen, thanks for the questions and the comments. Yeah, so our main replacement is our biggest initiative. There are a lot of challenges and costs that do come with water main breaks. We're always looking at how can we improve it, and that's to this slide here on optimization. We saw in the previous slide where it shows where we're going, and I think we're still strong in the recommendation that was given to us, but also based on our experience that if we don't replace these pipes, we're going to be in a real challenge. And then also to keep lockstep with all the other capital needs of the city, it's important that we replace these pipes and we sequence it in a way that's cost efficient and minimize impacts to the community. We're also going through all the growth and private development on Upper State Street, as you're well aware of, making sure that we're able to have the infrastructure replaced in those areas to handle the new development is just really important. And we are targeting areas that is a part of that modeling that we're doing that do incorporate the general plan for the city. So our business districts, our highest density areas for residents. So we're being as surgical as we can with the funds. And there are things that do take from the main replacement funding. There's one-off projects that are critical to being able to serve the city, or to serve water, convey water. And so we do have these pipe segments that cost a lot of money. And so those more expensive pipe segments do take away from our ability to perhaps in the future hit the mileage targets that we want to hit. So the challenges are just very complex, but we are working on, as Ms. Shoup mentioned, developing the best contracts possible. We are seeing inflation starting to taper and get more around its norm level. We're looking at procurement. If we are replacing main at this rate, should we be looking more full scale in our procurement of parts on multi-year basis, with vendors, with other agencies that are also ramping up their main replacement programs. When I recently met with our technology group, and up in the Bay Area, we went to the technology lab at Berkeley, and I talked a lot about replacement efforts, and they're ramping too. They've got different challenges, different pipe material types. We just happen to grow during a time that leaves us with a lot of cast iron and a lot of likely breaks in the future. So just moving on here. Further analysis and forecasting of staffing needs. We are really cognizant of the strain that staff are under. We're focused on the solutions and not just the problems. So we're going to be looking a little bit more about, do we need to add staff in order to match the capital needs? We're working through our consultant engineers on designs, and we're maximizing the use of our consultants. But we're going to be giving probably updates on that further in the future. And then we are applying an O&M engineer role to water in particular. We recognize that doing the asset management work, we need to identify where our highest consequence, highest risk of failure pipes are, and then come up with ways to address them. It might not be a full-scale replacement. It might just mean installing an extra valve somewhere or replacing a valve, but being strategic again about how we're spending that main replacement money. Hopefully, the main replacement program is stabilized, but we really do want to apply an extra layer of oversight to the program and steering it in a way that maximizes the benefit of the funding. And with that, any final questions? And I will point out, this is a group of our staff. They actually made this little image right here. This group is being recognized for their response at Gibraltar for the January night storms. There was a handful of them being recognized. It was really awesome to see. They said, no, we're all getting in the picture, and then they went ahead and dressed it up this way for the holidays. So with that, happy holidays, and if there's any further questions, I'm happy to answer them.
So, apologies if this is like a little bit crazy or perfect world of a question, but is there ever any circumstance where, coming from the assumption that most of the retention issues can be traced back to like cost of living or housing shortage issues in Santa Barbara, and people's, increasing costs if you're renting or whatever, right? You don't have control over like your housing costs, right? Like, would the city ever consider like housing for employees as a capital project that would help with retention? I know that's a crazy question, but like in the long term, like there's no, unless there's like a huge economy crash or whatever, that doesn't seem like it's going to impact Santa Barbara housing prices. In the long term, like in 50 years, will anyone be able to afford to work for, water or whatever? And people who live here still need that. So like, what if again, I don't know anything about how funding works, but what if there was like, the city now owns, a school that doesn't exist anymore, land that wasn't being used for something else, and builds, low-cost housing, and that gets rolled into the cost of, whatever, which still seems like it might be less than fixing a dam.
Yeah. No, I think it's a fantastic question, and we certainly saw Cottage Hospital do that.
Right. That's
They,
sort of what made me think of it.
Bought their competition and turned it into housing for their staff. It was quite smooth.
And I know people who benefit from that and like would have moved away, right, and not
Right.
been staffing,
Exactly, and it's one of those things. You think back, if we would have done 20 years ago, had kind of identified this on the horizon and said, we want to make sure that some of these essential services can still afford. And again, I think there's a way in which this pencils out, because it's not that it's free rent, they're paying rent, and eventually over time it does start to balance out, because the city doesn't need to make a profit off of its employees if they're housed here in town. I do think there's a method there. I don't know how to make that happen, and I think that's definitely an area we could explore. I think as an enterprise fund, we do have a little more flexibility to do projects like that, where the general fund's a little more constrained with maybe some of those limitations. But I would certainly welcome the opportunity to kind of explore that. It'd be nice to kind of meet some other agencies that are facing similar issues.
Yeah, if I may, Yes, I mean, absolutely, and keep bringing it up. Some issues that come up are that not everybody who works for the city wants to live together. They want to be able to go home and have
Right.
some privacy was one thing. I'm just,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's being talked about in different ways, and other things that have come up just to share, but I think it still needs to be maybe in the class and comments. Maybe staff could really relay what the wishes are, but other things, just to respond to that, is that not everybody wants to live in Santa Barbara, and for other reasons, their spouses, their families, there's whatever it is, and what I hear over and over is compensation. Give us the additional compensation so we can choose. So it's obviously not every staff member is monolithic. And I think if there were, I know, I'm not saying you saying that, I'm just, not at all. No, it's, but just in that conversation of considerations are options then. So some employee housing, some maybe money towards first-time buying opportunities, or some more towards, actual pay compensation. So I think keep bringing it up, because I think that the more ideas and ways to address it, but I would say again, Measure C is infrastructure type money, and I would say that housing is an infrastructure type thing. Yeah.
Right, I certainly didn't mean it as like the.
No, not to you.
one true
It's
solution.
public comment. Public comment.
Absolutely. Okay, anything else from the commission? Do we have any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think we can move on to the water supply update and annual water supply management report.
I do appreciate your patience on that last item and just being able to kind of, that whole, because it's a lot of stuff is behind the
so
scenes,
much,
and I really appreciate the commission's patience on that, and I think it will hopefully serve well in our future conversations that we do have. So, thank you.
Good morning, Water Commission and Councilmember Sneddon. My name is Dakota Corey, and I'm the Water Supply Manager, Water Supply and Services Manager. And today we are back. We usually come twice a year to give you an update on our water supplies. So typically the way this works is we're here at the end of the rainy season and then at the start of the water year. So this is a continuation of our presentation from last month, where we're into the new water year, and we're going to provide an update on our water supplies. If we can go to the next slide, please. So an outline of our presentation, we are going to talk today about our annual water supply management report. This is a backwards looking report, so we'll be looking back at water year 23 and recapping the status of our supplies, significant issues, capital projects, et cetera. And then we'll also be looking forward at the next 3 years and our water supply outlook, how we stand with water supplies to meet our community's needs. And one of the reasons that we do this report is it's a requirement of our contract for State Water Project water through Central Coast Water Authority. And we basically pledged that we would make a finding each year that our groundwater basins are not in significant decline as a result of signing up to take state water. So we'll be hoping to make those findings at the end of this presentation, and that would be a recommendation for you all to recommend to council moving forward. Next slide. And it looks like I jumped ahead a little bit in what I was describing, but again, this is a requirement of our State Water Project environmental report, and then we hope to make those findings at the end of the presentation. And from here on out, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Dana Hoffenberg, and I also wanted to mention that we have Ms. Jasmine Showers here today. There are 2 water resources analysts, and they have been doing all the heavy lifting on this work, and I'm excited for them to present their work to you.
All right, good morning. As Ms. Corey said, my name is Dana Hoffenberg. I'm a water resources analyst, and I'm going to be taking you through our annual water supply management recap this year. So starting off, water year 2023, as we know, was very wet. Here are some of our rainfall totals. You can see at Gibraltar, we were over 200% of normal, and as well in the front country. So it was a very wet year for us. So just looking at that more visually, here's our history of rainfall totals at Gibraltar in the past 50 years. The height of the blue bars shows the inches of rainfall. The red line shows the 50-year average. And then we added in this orange line a couple years ago, I believe, to show a 10-year running average. And that was to give us a better understanding of overall trends and maybe changes in trends as a result of climate change. So you can see starting around 2000, there's kind of an overall downward trend. But then with the very wet year in water year 23, that average is spiking back up. Okay, so looking at our planned production versus our actual production and that supply mix. So the height of the bars here shows our actual production, and then the color blocking shows our supply mix. So in the planned column on the left, this did account for assumed conservation. If you recall, as we were going into water year 2023, it was dry. So we were assuming there was going to be mandatory conservation in the spring. So the height of that bar does show 15% less than what was projected in our enhanced urban water management plan. And then what actually happened, and the right-hand column to the right, our customers did conserve, but not because of mandatory conservation requirements. They conserved because it was a very wet year, and there was a lot of suppressed demand because of that. Because it was very wet, we were able to use a lot more of our surface water reservoirs than we were initially expecting. You'll see the light blue box there. We were able to use a lot more water from Gibraltar. We were also able to rest our groundwater basins. You can see in the yellow box there, it was a lot smaller what we actually used versus what we planned on using. Okay, so this gives us an overall look of our production over time. The solid black line shows actual production, and the blue dotted line, I guess, there on the right-hand side, that shows our projected demands according to our enhanced urban water management plan. So you can see we started off using the 2019 demands as a baseline and projecting out into the future. In 2020 through 2022, the black trend line and the blue line match very closely. We were really on par with the urban plan's projections were very much reflecting what we were actually seeing. And then with this past water year in 23, you can see that black line really does go down, and we kind of diverge from our projections. And that, again, is because it was a very wet year. So it will be interesting to see going forward what our customer demand trends continue to be, if they will continue to track below projections, or if they will perhaps rebound back up to where our projections are. So that's a wait and see that we're going to be monitoring. Okay, so here's our implementation strategy that was presented in our enhanced urban water management plan. As you can see here on the left-hand side, we look at demands in relation to supply reductions. And then that star is where we are today. We have no supply reductions, but our demands are hovering in that in between phase 1 and 2. So like I said before, our projections, our customer demand is quite suppressed from our projections right now because it was quite a wet year. So we're going to be monitoring to see how those demands react as we're moving forward. So right now we are in phase 1, which is kind of a wait and see. It's a monitoring phase. And then as we eventually move into phase 2, that will be when we start planning for our next available supply. And that next available supply has been identified in our urban plan, would be expansion of the desal plant. All right, so moving into our overall water supply outlook for the next few years. So our planning horizon is generally 3 years, so 3 rainy seasons, essentially. We do take a very conservative approach in our planning. We assume we're going to have dry conditions. And I do say that as it's raining outside and as my left foot is completely wet from stepping in the torrent of rain to get over here. So we do assume very dry conditions. Even assuming those dry conditions, assuming the next 3 rainy seasons don't deliver, we are still looking good. We have enough supplies to meet demands for the next 3 water years. If dry conditions continue, we will be entering that 4th rainy season, so water year 2027, with limited stored Kachuma and state water project supplies. We are planning to not use any groundwater in the next 3 years to really continue to rest those basins and to use some state water project water instead for water year 25 and 26. So here's a kind of a broader look at our overall actual demands and water supply mix and our projected mixes going forward. So again, the height of the bars here shows the demands, and then the color blocking shows the supply mix. So the 2012 through 2023 are actuals, and then on the far right, we have our 3 projected years. So you can see overall, when the height of the bars depress, that really shows our customers' responsiveness to our drought efforts in our most recent drought. You can also see our more diversification of our water supply portfolio with the addition of desal with that green bar. You can see again with in 2023, the bar is a bit shorter again because we had quite a wet year that year. And then the height of the bar does jump back up for the next 3 years because we're going to continue to use our projected numbers from our enhanced urban water management plan. So it's possible, depending on how wet the year is and how our customers react, that, it will actually be lower than that. But we do act conservatively, and we plan based on what our projections are in the urban plan. So you'll see that we, again, are not planning to use any groundwater for the next few years. Okay, so moving into some overall important supply planning issues and capital projects. So this is a broad range of different things we're keeping an eye on. A lot of these operate at the federal level, and when we're operating at the federal level, we move very slowly. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of updates on some of these items, but we are continuing to monitor and track them, and we'll provide updates as we receive them. For the state water rights order that was handed down in 2019, we are in our implementation phase. We're working with our JPAs, CCRB and COM, to make sure that we're implementing that order appropriately with the Bureau of Reclamation. We don't have a lot of updates on the Kachuma project biological opinion. It's kind of in a wait and see phase right now. With the Kachuma contract, the Bureau of Reclamation did opt to just do another 3-year contract extension. So again, they put off the full long-term contract negotiation process. So we're in another 3-year contract that expires in September of 2026 at this point. We don't have a lot of updates on the Delta conveyance at this point. And again, the state water contract assignment is kind of in a holding pattern. We are hoping to, in the future, have our state water contract assignment be assigned to our JPA CCWA rather than the county. But the county has not taken any action on making that happen at this point. And they likely won't until the legal action in the last bullet point is resolved. And the legal action that is still ongoing. We don't have a lot of updates on that yet. So there's a lot of capital happening, as Mr. Wardemus-Shue already pointed out. We have some summaries of these different projects for you that I encourage you to look through our report that goes in depth into these. I will touch on the AMI project, though, a little bit more in depth. That's our automated metering infrastructure program. That program, we did successfully deploy all the infrastructure and network for that program, so that's very exciting. All of the city's water meters do now have radios on them, so we can collect hourly water usage data. We are currently in process of developing and deploying the customer portal side of things. So the back end of the system is all set up, and we're working on the customer side. We do expect that to be rolled out to all customers early next year. Currently, we're doing a phased kind of beta rollout approach. So not all customers have access to it yet, but early next year it will be available to all customers, and it will also that will also be where customers go to pay their bills. So that's a very exciting project that we're looking forward to. Okay, so as Ms. Corey mentioned earlier, we have to make some groundwater findings as a part of our state water contract. We have to make the finding that our groundwater basins are in long-term balance. So I'm going to be delving a little bit more into just our specific groundwater resources now. So as you know, we conjunctively use our groundwater supplies in coordination with our other many water supplies. We tend to rely on groundwater pumping during times of drought. So we did pump our basins pretty heavily in the last drought, and we are resting them now. It is also a hyper-local supply, which is really important if there were to be some kind of catastrophic emergency that would cut us off from our more distant supplies, that would make us unable to reach our surface water reservoirs or the State Water Project, for example. So just going to orient you a bit to our groundwater basins. So the green basin up towards the north is the Foothill Groundwater Basin, and it's the smaller of the two basins. Then we have the Santa Barbara Basin, which is the blue, and that is divided into two storage units. Storage Unit 1, which is where we do most of our pumping out of, and then Storage Unit 3. And Storage Unit 3 has difficult water quality, and so we only pump out of Storage Unit 3 to help supplement our recycled water system. And then the black triangles you'll see throughout here are our city production wells. Okay, so delving more into the Foothill Basin.
Can I ask a quick question before you move to the next slide? You've got a couple of light blue Goleta Basin markings within Unit 3, and then off to the very far right to the east, touching into the Montecito Basin? Is that just a coloring?
I think that's just a coloring issue. So the light blue areas within the Santa Barbara Basin are just because there's holes within the city boundary. So it's just because, like that light blue area right under the A in storage, that area is technically not within city limits. So it's not colored gray. So it's making it look light blue. But yeah, we can maybe look into fixing the coloring on that. But that is all the Santa Barbara Basin. The Goleta Basin is just that light blue area to the west of the green area where the Foothill Basin is.
Okay,
Yeah.
so geologically it is the Santa Barbara Basin.
Correct,
It's
yes.
just politically, it is not.
Politically, the underlying area is not the city of Santa Barbara, correct. But it is part of our groundwater basin, yes.
And it is part of our service area. We do service that area.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll dive back into the Foothill Basin then, and that's the green area on the map. There are several pumpers in that basin. The La Cumbre Mutual Water Company is one of them. There is also a mix of various private pumpers in the basin, but they are probably not the predominant pumpers in the basin. The predominant pumpers would be the city and La Cumbre. So we do have to do this a very high level groundwater balance to make sure that we're in compliance with our state water contract requirements. This is very high level and it's very conservative, and we don't assume any recharge in these calculations. So it is very high level. So we estimate, based on our 2018 USGS study, that there's a little over 8,000 acre feet available for pumping in the Foothill Basin, and due to pumping, we estimate that there's around 3,800 acre feet left. Again, that's assuming no recharge. To give you some sense of scale, the city's total pumping capacity between both the Santa Barbara Basin and the Foothill Basin is about 3,500 acre feet a year. So we don't even have the physical capacity to pump that much out in a given year. As I mentioned earlier, we're not planning on doing any pumping from our groundwater basins for the next 3 years. We're planning on resting the basins. We are doing an aquifer storage and recovery pilot project. So this is essentially an injection pilot project where we are injecting water down back into our groundwater basins. So that is in process now. So we did inject 11 acre feet into the groundwater basin in Foothill in water year 23. So overall, the water levels are recovering in the Foothill Basin. At this point, they have recovered to levels similar to what we were seeing in the early 1990s. So here's just more graphical representation. The many colorful lines moving horizontally more towards the top of the chart show our groundwater elevations based on what we're seeing at our monitoring wells. And then along the bottom, you'll see pumping. So green is pumping from entities that are not the city, and then red is the city's pumping. And you can see we pumped the basin quite a bit during the most recent drought, and that did cause groundwater levels to drop. And then we turned off our pumping, and as you can see, those levels are again starting to recover. And we're back to where about early 1990s levels. Okay, so moving on to storage unit 1. So this is a larger storage unit. We see that there's probably around 16,000 acre feet of storage available in that basin. Due to pumping, we estimate we have around 9,600 acre feet left. Again, that's assuming there has been no recharge. We stopped pumping from that basin after the rains earlier this year. And again, we don't plan to do any pumping in water years 24 through 26. This storage unit, again, it is closer to the ocean. So with this storage unit, we focus more on monitoring seawater intrusion, whereas in Foothill Basin, we're looking more at overall elevation, groundwater elevation. In this storage unit, we're really closely monitoring those chlorides in the basin. And again, here's a chart showing groundwater levels in storage unit 1. Again, the top lines show groundwater elevation according to our monitoring wells, and the red at the bottom shows pumping. You can see here the storage unit 1 recovers a lot quickly than Foothill does. Like as soon as we stopped pumping, the groundwater elevation levels popped back up pretty quickly. So again, in this basin, we're not looking as much at groundwater levels, but we are looking at sea level intrusion. Okay, and so we're going to dive into our monitoring a bit more here. So we have several monitoring wells that we use to keep an eye on chlorides in the basin. So just to orient ourselves, the Pacific Ocean is in the bottom right-hand corner. The orange line you'll see moving through the map, that's the 101. So we have a series of monitoring wells that start closer to the ocean and then move inland closer to our city production wells. And those black triangles, they're a little bit harder to see, but kind of in the middle, maybe upper left of the map, those are our city production wells. So we have monitoring wells moving from the ocean closer to our production wells. And also just to further orient ourselves, circled in yellow is the El Estero Water Resource Center. Okay, so first we're going to focus on the monitoring well that's closest to the ocean. So on the left we have chlorides, and on the right we have conductance. You can see in the last drought in the 80s and 90s, as we were pumping the basin pretty heavily, the chlorides did increase in the basin. And then as the drought subsided and we subsided with our pumping, the basin did start recovering. We see recovery at this monitoring well as being around 6,000 milligrams per liter. And then you can see as we entered the most recent drought and pumping increased, there was starting to be more influence of chlorides into the basin. And now that pumping has stopped, we're starting to see a bit of recovery, but we're still recovering when it comes to this location. Okay, so we continue our journey inward. So now we're at the monitoring well that's closest to the El Estero Water Resource Center. We're about halfway between the ocean and the 101. So the scales, keep in mind, from this slide and the last slide are the same. So you can see when we're looking at the chlorides at this monitoring well, it's quite a bit lower, which is good. That's what we want to see because at this point we're moving closer to our production wells. So again, in the last drought, we're seeing a lot more chlorides with pumping. The basin recovered. Chlorides jumped back up a little bit again in the most recent drought, and again, we're starting to see recovery. And then we're jumping the freeway. We're now moving even closer to our production wells. And this is looking really good. So this is the monitoring well that is closest to our actual production wells. And again, it's staying really steady, very close to zero. So we're happy to see that there's not evidence of seawater intrusion as we get closer to our monitoring, as we get closer to our production wells. So storage unit 3, which I mentioned earlier, again, it does have difficult water quality. We only use it to supplement our recycled water system. We don't ever use that water for our potable water system. We did not use any water from that storage unit in water year 23. And we estimate a safe yield of about 200 acre-feet a year. Okay, and with that, that brings us to our recommendation today. But I'm also happy to take any questions prior to that. And the recommendation is that Water Commission recommend that Council approve and adopt the report for the 2023 water year and find that our groundwater resources are in long-term balance.
I just had a clarifying question for the chloride level. So I heard you say that like 6,000 is about like the kind of threshold, or coming back to that first monitoring well.
Yeah.
But everything else is way below that. And so is that like the level at which you would, if we saw the other two monitoring wells start to get towards that, like at what level would it start to be a concern, I guess is the question.
I don't know if we would want the other monitoring levels to get up to 6,000. I think that's just for the one that's closest to the ocean. Yeah. I think we see for this monitoring well location, 6,000 would be considered recovery, but we wouldn't want to see that level at the other inland monitoring wells.
So what level would be like, oh, this is something to start paying attention to or be concerned about?
I think as soon as we start seeing any hits on the other side of the highway, that would be an indication it's getting close.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Please,
Sorry.
sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. For storage unit 3, offsetting recycled water, is it like it can be tapped directly to water De La Guerra Plaza, or is it a calculation of usage, like a paper offset?
So we have a well in storage unit 3. It's in Hidden Valley in the park there. And most of the neighbors hate when we turn it on because it smells like H2S sulfur. It's very, very strong. But we recognize that that asset is there and it is plumbed into the recycled water system. So we typically have to use a lot of chlorine to suppress the H2S so that it's doesn't so objectionable when sprinklers come on. But it is there, and we want to recognize that it's there as part of our system. I think we did tap into it for a short period of time to augment the recycled water system. But
So it can't be tapped and then directly used to water, so it has to be tapped into the recycled system and then still processed further.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We were just trying to find the production well in storage unit 3 because I didn't see a little triangle in this map.
We'll make sure to include that. I don't know if it's actually in there.
Thank you.
I'll move that we adopt staff's recommendation if that's where we're at.
Second. I seconded. I don't think we did public comment.
We did not. Thank you so much, sorry. Do we have public comment?
No.
Fantastic.
To the motion.
And let's go with the motion.
Commissioner Young,
Yes.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Vice Chair Snyder,
Yes.
Chair Cooney.
Yes. So the motion is passed, or the recommendation is, go ahead.
I have nothing to say.
You looked like
The
you did.
recommendation passed.
Fantastic.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, so I believe we are now, thank you so much for that, obviously great information. And let's move on to the Water Resources Manager's Report.
Yes. Bring it home. Chair Cooney, Commissioners, this was such a delightful meeting. We gained 100 acre feet in Gibraltar just while we sat here. It's just like magic. You did great work. We just talk about Gibraltar and it fills up. It's wonderful. So really, really great. I mean, I just looked at the totals from this last storm event. We're already at 6.7 inches at Gibraltar, almost 12 inches at Old Man Mountain. For those who know where that is, it's in the upper watersheds of Gibraltar. So it's really impressive rain totals. So lots of activity. Before we get into the presentation, I just want to talk a little bit about recent actions by the State Board, approving regulations for direct potable reuse. Lots of questions. What does that mean? Lots of emails against and for moving forward with any potable reuse activity and direct potable reuse activity in the community. It certainly is something we've been tracking. It was part of our urban water management plan, but to, I think, put the community at ease, it is not something we are looking to do immediately. I think according to our planning, I think it is somewhere in the 2030s is that would be a likely option. I do have to set the stage. I just got back from an aqua conference, and those agencies that are moving forward with it, wow, the costs are astronomical right now. And I think it's good to let them go through that process and learn. Ventura's Pure project is approaching $500 million, $500 million for a 5,000 acre foot a year facility. So really significant numbers. Northern San Diego County, they're over $1 billion for their facility, which was a 15,000 MGD. It was not. Anyway, the numbers were just astronomical. But we're certainly engaged. I do see this as a future supply for the city. I'm not, but I think there's a lot of, we want to watch, see, learn. I think there's a lot of education that needs to go on. I think we can still communicate with our public about what it is and share our concerns and what we're focused on. But that's where I'm standing on this. I did get some questions from the Independent asking as well to opine. So certainly if you have any questions today or have any follow-up questions, I'm happy to field those. Yeah.
So the treatment train is fairly similar to desalination. In fact, it's a little simpler because we don't not as much reverse osmosis. So what's the main driver for the additional cost? Are there other factors that are being taken into consideration for making it so much more expensive?
So there are a few, and as you know, it is very similar, but ironically, the ocean water is a hell of a lot more stable. Like it just doesn't have that variability that you get in wastewater, as much as well, you've all gotten a tour of El Estero, and it is a living biological system, and it responds to different things being put into the sewer system, and so building a system robust enough. Most of what I'm seeing right now, and that's likely what we would do as well, is surface water augmentation. So they are treating it and then piping it inland, putting it in another body of water, and then treating it again. So it's all the infrastructure, I think, that leads up to making that happen. I know Ventura's is a groundwater augmentation project. So yeah, I think that's a big contributor as well to the costs. Mm-hmm.
I had another question too, just a reminder, because we did the recycled water market report, I think it was called, relatively recently. And I think did that look at DPR or looked at the basically putting water in a small surface water reservoir? And if I recall, it was like a relatively comparable price between expanding the desal and that recycled water option. But can you just refresh me on that?
Yeah, no, that's good. You're mixing three different points. This is good. This is good. I can clarify. So we did a potable reuse study, and happy to share that link with you. And that looked at what we could do with indirect and direct potable reuse. Then we also did the recycled water market assessment, and that looked at how or what we could do with our current recycled water, like what other applications, and there weren't a ton of applications, additional applications out there for recycled water.
That was for Purple Pipe.
It's just Purple Pipe, yeah. And then there's our urban water management plan, which looked at if the city needed additional increments of water, desal expansion was by far the cheaper option rather than building a whole new treatment plant. But again, I think those are things that we're going to be updating that every 5 years, yeah. So we'll be revisiting that conversation as things change. The desal plant ages and different infrastructure needs to be made. I think there's a different opportunities will show up there.
Thanks.
It was good. I'm glad you mentioned that because we've talked about it in so many different venues, yes. So next month agenda, you got a sneak peek. We're talking rates, and it's going to be. We are looking at right now 15% revenue increases for 3 years in a row for water, 12.5% each year for 3 years for wastewater. Those are just, for those who've been on the commission for a while and just, that's really hard. And as you know, we already have some pretty, aggressive rates. I mean, we've been dealing with a lot of challenges over the last few years. And so I do have a lot of consternation, and I really want to use January's meeting as a work session to really work through those. I hope to bring to you a lot of different options, and we can talk about the trade-offs of those different options. And then, of course, addressing the affordability for those who are low income and are challenged. What can we do short term, and then what can we do long term? I think they're going to talk about some of those options. And so January work session, and then we will be back in February to, again, continue that conversation. So there's more to come on that. I'm happy to sidebar with any of you who had questions in the meantime, and I'm trying to get all these materials out to you in early January so you have to have more time to look through what we're going to be talking about.
And did we make a decision about if we're going to have a 3-hour meeting in January?
Yes.
I think we're headed that way just to make sure we have plenty of time to get through it. I know our presentations won't be that long for sure, but I think we're going to want to have a robust conversation, and I'm contemplating whether I want to have at least some level of spreadsheet up and we can see how things move. And I'll go over this again, but to give you a sense, for every $600,000 of new revenue, it yields 1% for the water system, and it's about $350,000 in additional revenue yields 1% increase in the wastewater revenue. So when we go through and we talk about cutting costs, for every $600,000 we cut, it reduces it by 1% or increases.
You know, one comment I always get is that rates go up during a drought when we're using less water. And now with all this rain and water, rates are going to go up again. And I can understand why that is, but I guarantee you,
Yes.
a huge swath of the public does not understand that.
Yes. Yes, and I welcome your support in helping me with this message. It's going to be tough. We do have a contract with a public outreach agency to help us, outreach firm to help us with outreach on this, because it's going to be tough. We aren't raising rates. We are seeing significant conservation. So far, we're estimated that we're missing about a $1.8 million in revenue this year, but that is not what's driving what we're talking about. It is, and it's what's really frustrating to me is I've really prided ourselves on being on top of it. Like we've been doing 5% increases. We've been staying up with what's happened in the market and across, and we'll get into these details. I'm still scratching my head at all the things that are compounding on top of each other and just adding to it. I mean, it used water mains 10 years ago, we were replacing them at $1 million a mile, and now it's $2.5 million a mile. It's just enormous hits, and part of it is there's just a lack of competition. There's really 2 companies bidding on these projects, and they're huge and they're extensive in our community. And so there's just a lot of factors going into it. And I'm hoping we can talk through those, and certainly we'll be taking copious notes because we're going to need to work on that message because I think it's really complicated.
Well, how do you get the message out to the public? What's the mechanism for that? I mean, it's one thing for us to sit and discuss it.
No, and that's it.
Brainstorm, and that's it's a very limited audience.
Right. So we've got several. We've got our newsletter that we regularly send out. We've got our water bill inserts. Lauren here is actually our PIO for Public Works, so she's gets us into our CNIB, so that's weekly. So we've got lots of opportunities. We've got digital media to work with as well. I think it's getting our message and then just hitting those. And then, of course, we have to do our Prop 218 notice. And then that's a 45-day noticing period. And again, lots of opportunities there. Every single one of these meetings is another opportunity. So how do we start to build, interest? So starting to get that message out even ahead of our January meeting so that for those who are interested can join and start to participate and hopefully learn what are the issues we're trying to tackle.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
just following up on that, is the increases, are those industry-wide or those industry-wide plus localized, or are they mainly regional?
We'll have HDR, who's our consultant on Supine, but he's saying that they're seeing that across the industry.
Say that again?
Yeah, we'll have our consultant opine on this, but they are saying they're seeing it across the industry. Typically, numbers like this, when you see numbers like this, someone fell asleep and wasn't doing rate increases. And this is what I'm really frustrated by. I've been really trying to avoid having this type of significant increase. So anyway, we're going to work through that and look at what things we can shift and move around to try and come up with something that is, I think more palatable is probably in the 8 to 10% range, given that that's what the community is hearing from economic experts already. But it's certainly not a 1-year increase like that, which is tough. So having said all that, yeah, happy holidays. I did want to opine a little bit more on the Tesla battery install. It was really great, and thank you, Councilmember Sen, for being there as well. It was really great to kind of celebrate that and just talk about our future plans to continue things like that. And anyway, I was just pleased, and I really appreciated the support of the Sustainability and Resiliency crew to kind of help us with that. I mean, it's just areas in the past where we just didn't have the manpower to kind of move things like that. We certainly have the interest, but it was great to have them supporting us as well on that. So really did appreciate that. I am going to skip down. I just wanted to highlight some of the new graphics in here. We've been continuing to work on this. I want to thank our water resources analysts who are here, Jasmine and Dana, for helping with this. Really trying to help out with explaining how the new, they haven't been adopted just yet, but the proposed regulations look like and how they might impact us. I think this is helpful, and of course, once they do get codified, we can start working on more of a game plan, but we are in a good spot. We have been working hard, our community's doing what we need them to do, so I'm not terribly worried about them, but would appreciate it. If you've had a chance to look at this, feel free to send us an email, or at the next meeting when we have these in here, if you have any other suggestions, we are listening. We're really trying to freshen it up and make sure that we're providing information that is helpful to you and the public when it comes to where we are with our water supplies. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
No more questions from the board? Do we have public comment?
No, we do not.
Okay, fantastic. In that case, we'll bring this meeting to a close, and we'll be back here on January 18th at 9 a.m. for a 3-hour meeting.
Happy holidays.
And happy holidays.